You're listening to the Soju Sessions, episode 12 on the Soju Talk Nation podcast feed. Coming up, Therese joins the show to talk dating in K-pop and relationship stories. Without any further ado, this is the Soju Sessions. Welcome to Soju Sessions. I'm your host, Crispy, also known as Crispy Wonton, or simply just Anton. And joining me this week is the Thirst Queen herself, Therese. Welcome to the show, Therese.
Hi.
How are you today, Therese?
So much better now that I'm off work and in my apartment and looking at the beautiful sunset.
We are recording this on June 11th in the evening. So my time, Pacific Standard Time, 6:21 p.m. So there's still some sunlight out. But yeah, you're in the Midwest, so you are getting the sunset. You're kind of just enjoying the transition into the weekend. So
yes.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining me on this Friday night to talk about a couple of very interesting topics I've had for on my mind for a minute now. So, kind of the genesis of our conversation is our Discord adventures over the past year or so over the pandemic. Things get wild on Discord in the evenings. Sometimes there's alcohol involved. It then leads to stories of dating apps, Hinge specifically, and then sort of kind of turns into dating advice. So I wanted to bring Therese on because she is one of the main culprits of a lot of this conversation. And, kind of tie things... Culprits, yes. One of the people who are actively involved in perpetrating things on the server and in text. It's all there. It's all recorded. But to kind of bring it all into the umbrella of K-pop, I kind of thought about this week our perception of dating in K-pop and kind of things that I've seen in the past, whether that's articles, famous couples that have dated, or even the perspective of certain idols, certain former idols talking about it now that they're separated and away from the industry. So to kind of open things up, Therese, what is your perception and experience with K-pop idols and dating?
So I'm still a relatively new K-pop fan. I think I started following the community and the people in it around late 2018, which since then, not much has happened. Like, there's been the couple Dispatch releases at New Year's, but it's nothing insane, minus Jennie and G-Dragon, or like Jennie and Kai breaking up. But if I remember, that was kind of, no one really saw them together anyway. So yeah, it's been a lot of quarantine, not a lot of dating scandal news. And I'm an adult, so I'm perfectly fine with idols dating. I don't know.
No, and I think that's coming from a point of view where we're a little bit older and we see the importance of idols finding love, being in relationships, as opposed to kind of the restrictive nature of how it's perceived or how it's reported on, right? And it kind of leads into like famous couples that we hear of that we're cognizant about, and kind of how they got to the places they got to within the relationship. I think the one that comes to mind is Rain and Kim Tae-hee. Yeah, they're very much seniors in the game, right? And it's kind of nice to see them just be happy and married, but also kind of sad to think that they had to pay a certain level of dues, just being in entertainment, being in the spotlight over the years, not being able to fully address or express their emotions and love for each other. But I guess they're kind of the final form of what it could be to find love and be a couple, be married in entertainment. But that does kind of lead into kind of parallels and kind of the more challenging situations that idols have had in the past. So it's a little bit of an older story, but I think it's still relevant. So in 2018, Dawn and Hyuna were reported that they are in a relationship. They made it public, and at the time, Dawn was part of Pentagon. Hyuna was a soloist at Cube, both at Cube, but their contracts were canceled because the relationship went public and everyone knew about it. Even though the company themselves did a lot to deny and keep the information secret. Per Tamar Herman from Billboard, according to Cube, the decision was made in response to the pair publicly declaring their 2-year-long relationship despite the company's prior denial, the decision to cancel their contracts. And, 2018 doesn't feel that long ago, but that was 3 years ago. And in my opinion, I feel like a lot has changed. What do you... I guess my question to you is why do you think it took so long for the Korean culture and Korean consciousness to kind of address these things and to have kind of a better shift towards accepting idols and relationships? Because I do feel like now in 2021, that perception is much different than it was in 2018. And I guess to kind of address Dawn and Hyuna, do you feel like they're in a better place now that they've kind of separated from kind of the old established way of seeing relationships in K-pop?
I mean, they've definitely made their waves since, so they're doing great. So I guess it was, I guess it wasn't their decision, but it was a decision made and they worked with it well. I'm not really sure if Korea has fully accepted K-pop idols dating. Like I said, I don't think there's been a ton of news about it for people to get really angry about or, just react to. But I'm pretty sure if something huge came out and then, more importantly, if there was any kind of public display of affection, I think the response would still be kind of the same as 2018. Granted, you definitely see that Korean culture is opening up to a lot of new ideas with, the dramas we've watched, and they're facing a lot of issues like having age gaps in couples, or they're adding more to the conversation. I just don't think the public is quite ready yet.
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I do think that there is a dissonance, right, between this idea, this fairy tale of our idols, our entertainers being in happy relationships, expressing that either through music or in dramas, but then in their real life, out in public with public P. What's the acronym? Public displays of affection. PDA.
Yeah.
It's still very taboo, and it's still all about humility, at least in public and in culture, right? And I do think that there's a strange conflict, right? Yeah, you were gonna say?
Yeah, I was just thinking K-pop, the whole subculture in itself, because it's not a general Korean culture. K-pop is specifically very open, in contrast to general Korean public. So I don't know, maybe there is something to it. But I think it helps that there are more international fans of K-pop that can stand up for their idols and say oh, it's fine that they're dating, I'm really happy for them. Rather than if they only had fans in Korea, then their whole career would be affected.
And I think it does open up the broader conversation of what K-pop has become over the past 3 years, right? In a very short amount of time of, you just starting your journey in K-pop, and really with all that's changed in the past 3 years, the fact that technology has grown in such a way, the fact that the pandemic, the circumstances have kind of forced everyone to be online, but also in a really contradictory way. It's actually flipped and now made people more accessible, because now everyone around the world has access to idols doing things, either idols with virtual concerts, virtual meetups. And I think, I guess this is just my opinion, but I do feel like companies are at least slightly aware of the fact that they have to represent cross-cultural norms a little bit more carefully. That being relationships, that being kind of the agency that idols have to date, to be in love, to actually be in the circumstances that they express in music and songs. And I also do think that the underlying like thing that drives it all is like money, right? Because now companies know that they need to make an imprint on the global market.
And
go ahead.
I do think it's a good, it's a business decision to say, oh, you shouldn't date because you'll make us more money, like more people will like you. And I think it also goes into the fact that, you know, with all of the new platforms coming out with Weverse, Universe, Bubble, they're really trying to give the fans more access to idols, like you said. I think that if an idol was dating someone, like another idol or something, it definitely limits the amount of attention they can give their fans, or at least appears to. So I think it makes sense to say, like, no, you shouldn't be dating, or we don't want people to know you're dating, because then more people will think, oh my gosh, he doesn't have as much time for me. She doesn't post as often. She's probably with her boyfriend, something like that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting like paradox in thinking, right? As far as like fan culture psychology, where on the one hand we want music to express love and affection and, you know, companionship, but then when like fan expectation, just general fan expectation, is that, oh, they're also very available for us because they're expressing that love and affection for us, right?
Like they exist for us.
Yeah, but then when they have an actual relationship, it's like, oh, but then you can draw creativity from the real life relationships you have to make music. But no, that's not what we want. We want us to be the inspiration.
I actually have a hot take about artistic work made in a relationship.
Oh, go for it.
I have found in a lot of works that if someone's madly in love and they're writing all these songs about how madly in love they are, the songs aren't that great. And I think it's the love goggles that you're just wearing them. Everything's rosy. You think this track sounds amazing, and then you release it and everyone's like, what? You're just in your own little world that other people might not understand.
But isn't that just so representative of what love does to a person? Or it's like,
right?
like you said, like love goggles, where it's like you think like the world works like very special, uniquely to your situation. And it isn't until later when you're separated that, oh no, I was acting a fool. So in a lot of ways, that could be like a historical document to their discography of this time in my life. I was going through this relationship.
Taylor Swift has talked about this before too, where it's just like, you know, or even Ariana Grande, like we've seen famous people confess like, oh yeah, I was being stupid. I was just so in love.
Yeah, and you know who, like, what producer is going to tell Ariana Grande or Taylor Swift that song's not working, right? So it exists and it's out there, but again, I do think it's part of the history of art, right? Where it, again, like we would love it to be perfect all the time, refined, polished, but oftentimes it's more of a reflection of that period in that person's life, whether that's a collection of producers or one person making the distinct decision to say, I'm going to express my love this way for everyone to hear. So, yeah, I can't think of an example like that in K-pop, but in Western music, which is where K-pop is trending to right now, it'll be interesting if something like that does happen, where it's very clear, right? Where some of the examples I can think of in the past is Taeyang from Big Bang. His songs were fire. So it's like I can't say like it's the direct comparison, but I really want to see a case study in which an idol in a relationship makes a song for his significant other that is not good or not very well received, and then what happens. So you know a couple that was fairly well received. We have in 2020, January 2nd. I know this is all old news, everyone. I get it. I'm sorry, but it does fit the topic. It does fit the genre of what we're trying to discuss today. Heechul and Momo were reported to be dating, and SM and JYP both delivered very simple statements. I can read them. They are very short. So this is actually label SJ, which is a sub label of SM, literally Super Junior. So hello, this is label SJ. We have confirmed with Hichil and Momo that they have recently started dating from being a close Sunbae and Hubei. Thank you. That is their statement.
Cute.
Let me read JYP. Hello, this is JYP Entertainment. We are confirming that Hichil and Momo are in a relationship. They have recently started a relationship that grew from Sunbae Hubei friendship in the industry. Thank you. As you can see, both companies seem to be pretty chill about it. Do you feel like this is a reflection of kind of the changing times? Do you feel like because these are two of the largest companies in Korea that hopefully other companies will follow suit?
So, I mean, they're like open to it. They're approaching it the way companies probably should, which is basically like, we know this, who cares? And because I do think like fighting back on it, saying stuff like, oh, we need to confirm, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I don't know. That kind of makes it seem like it's against the rules. But this way, they're just like, yeah, I don't know. Things are happening. Let's give you an update.
Yeah, and it still does kind of fall in line with the rules that we know of what JYP has said in the past. JYP, the company, where I think there is idols are permitted to date openly 3 years after debut. So, obviously the idols can date in secret all they want. But I think with this kind of announcement, it's like, okay, once you're of a certain age, then you can at least tell everyone about it. Which I think is kind of cool because like there's flexibility to that statement, right? Where it's not like strict, rigid, like you cannot date. It's just do not tell anyone you're dating until 3 years after debut.
I don't know. Okay, so this is kind of another case study that goes in the opposite direction. But there used to be 6 members of Day 6. And one of the members, shortly after their debut, got kicked out because he was dating a fan. And it was like she was posting about it. It was very obvious. And so he got kicked out. And I think it makes sense if they said you can't date, at least for the first year of your debut, because, that's kind of essentially your rise to fame. And it's like you don't know how you're going to handle that. You don't know who's going to try to be your friend just because they want to be your friend or otherwise. So I don't know. I think there might be something behind that.
I think in that case, the company has a vested interest, right? Where they have to vet that person. They have to make sure that person isn't going to like unravel like the group dynamics or like cause any scandals because they're a fan, first of all. So their intentions are already grounded in essentially pining over someone from afar. So I think that's a really like tricky situation because, I mean, who's to say that member from Day 6 isn't actually sincerely in love with this person? But at the same time, I can understand the company has a lot of money involved in this. So it's like, we got to check this.
Especially because I know she was actually posting spoilers about stuff they were doing, which is kind of how they got caught. So obviously if that's happening, then it's kind of on the company. Like this is a liability.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think that is probably the line, right? Where on the one hand, in 2018, JYP had this whole like JYP 2.0 event where we talked to investors and presented like this keynote speech about like these 4 main themes about the company. One of which was about creativity from happiness. So work-life balance, healthy lifestyle, and mental care. So mental health, but also allowing the idols and musicians to have a personal life. But what happens when that personal life, digs into the business? And now JYP has to step in and say, that's not okay. But then that goes to like any workplace, right? Because if you're dating someone...
you don't want to get distracted.
But also like you don't want your personal life to affect like your professional life in any circumstance. So... if you're working at McDonald's and your girlfriend's always visiting and she's always asking for free fries, I mean, that's kind of problematic. right?
Oh my gosh, you're not gonna give her your free fries?
I
Wow.
mean, well, that's the thing. It's like you can be subtle about it. It's like, hey, like, my lady wants some fries. I'm gonna, bring some after work. But if she's like coming up every day, like, in front of the line and saying, I need to be prioritized. I'm gonna be first, and then I will order, and you will not charge me in front of your manager. That's a bit of a problem, and I feel like that's kind of the parallel here. But maybe I'm just exaggerating. I don't know.
I mean, and on a side note, which we might be able to talk about this later, but I don't think you should date your coworkers.
Yeah, that is definitely
It's
that's well.
kind of taboo.
I mean, I think it's case by case. I think for the most part, you want to separate your real life and your professional life, but there are instances where I can understand, especially being an idol and entertainer, where if you're in the same company and everything is so restrictive for you, who better to understand you than someone who also is going through it?
That's true.
Yeah,
It's just like definitely there'd be some discourse
yeah.
if
There's
things ended poorly.
yeah. But that's actually a great. So let's segue. That's a great spot. So there is a YouTuber that I used to watch a lot. She's great. She's a former idol. Her what she goes by right now is Subini. Her real name is Christine Park. She is Korean American, born in Los Angeles. 26 years old. Her idol name at the time was Tina, and her group was Blady. So B Lady. They debuted in November 18th, 2018. Right now, she's an influencer, a YouTuber in Korea, and she does a few commentary shows about the K-pop industry from the perspective of a former idol. Fun fact, she is great friends with Ashley from Ladies Code, and they hang out all the time. So I like to throw that in because I love Ashley. Okay, so I went and rewatched a couple of her videos, one of which she brings on two former idols, Alex from High 4 and Eddie from JJCC. That's a mouthful to say. And they talk about dating, right? So let's go off the thing you just said. Like, what is your opinion about idols essentially dating coworkers, dating other idols either within the same company or idols they're going to have to see on a daily basis, whether that's music shows or promotions?
And it does make sense when, you're in such a restricted environment. This is like the only people you actually get to interact with. And like you get to see them on a daily basis. So it makes sense that you would develop some relationships from that, be it romantic or not. It's just like completely different idea, but I've had coworkers who have dated. They weren't in the same department, but we all still had to work together. And when they were good, they were a little too good. Like they were in their own little world. No one really understood what was going on. They weren't doing what they needed to. When they weren't good, it was affecting everyone. Like either way, it was affecting everyone. So I can imagine, if you do the occasional collab stage, or even if you're like helping work on a song or choreography or just dance practice, it's distracting not only to them, but to the people around them. So I don't approve of it, but I understand it.
And that's a excellent way to approach like any situation and circumstance, right? Because I think it just go more to this idea of it's a case by case, it's a spectrum of behaviors, right? Or it's like you hope that if people in the same company date, that they can keep their shit together. Oftentimes, that may not be the case. Well, let me ask you this. So with what we know about Korean culture and humility and the fact that there's so much pressure in the K-pop industry and as an entertainer, do you feel like idols are more equipped and more motivated to keep a lot of that on the down low and really focus on their work and their craft? Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of money at stake. So they do have to perform at a certain level. Do you feel like that is something that can help scaffold a lot of these perhaps distracting behaviors?
I think that JYP's 3-year rule is pretty golden because after 3 years, you know what you're doing. Like, you are officially a professional. You're entry level or a little past entry level. And that's great. That's when you're like, okay, I know my responsibilities. I know how to prioritize them. And I know how to have a life as well. So I think as soon as you're like developed as an artist, as a professional, yeah, go for it. And then find more inspiration along the way. But especially in the beginning stages when you're still learning stuff and you're still like getting your stage legs, I guess I should say. No, you should probably focus on your career. But I'm also from a very Western culture that really, what's the word? We live for our career more than other cultures, I think.
Yeah, and I think those rules are there to kind of, in a way, like help protect developing minds and developing emotions, right? Because oftentimes, like these are kids. They start as early as 12 years old as a trainee. Sometimes they'll debut at 15. Usually a little bit older, around 17, 18. But even then, like, who has anything figured out with regards to romance and how to interact with the rest of the world at that point in your life? So I do think that there's a little bit of a cushion. If anything, like a soft cushion, just to remind like the idols, like, hey, like probably think about focus on your work for the next 3 years before you let other things into your life. However it's phrased or however it's approached by idols, I think it is a good rule of thumb kind of situation. But once that 3 years is up, what do you think about the different ways in which idols date and how they seemingly all date and they all hide it? Because
okay, I am. Yes.
Well, go ahead.
Continue.
No, all you.
I am fascinated by the idea that idols can do everything they do and still meet people and fall in love and like have a romantic relationship. I can't even do like half of this. What are they doing? What kind of system do they have set up? Like, they must be so organized. There must be some sort of like secret club underground that everyone goes to hang out. Maybe you put your name on a list and you put like your top 3 choices of who you want to date, and then that person gets to like see your selfie or something. I don't know. I'm fascinated.
You know, I feel like a lot of that is hyperbole, right? Except Subini has all but confirmed like 90% of what you just said. So her show that she does on YouTube is called Idol Insider, and I don't know how often she does it anymore. But essentially, she talks about questions and things from her audience and her viewers of just like the secrets behind like being an idol over her time. And one of the ways in which idols meet each other is through this very hollowed legend of the Inkigayo sandwich. Have you heard of the Inkigayo sandwich, Therese?
No.
Let me tell you. So the Inkigayo sandwich, it happens on Inkigayo, on the show, the music show. And what happens is idols exchange their phone numbers by slipping their number into a sandwich and then giving it to the person they're interested in. I don't know if that still happens.
That's so cute.
All I know is as of 2019, when this video was released, she still talked about it. And it's also one of those like well-known secrets for the past decade that's just what happens.
I'm never gonna look at a sandwich the same again.
You're never gonna watch Inkigayo the same ever again. Like, you're gonna wonder who's eating a sandwich that day.
That's understandable. The sandwiches, though. When am I gonna get a note in my sandwich?
I mean, you just gotta. I would say post it on Discord that you're looking for an Inkigayo sandwich, and I think someone will understand what you're talking about. Perhaps. Some other ways that they described it on the show, very, very much like a natural social setting of what you would imagine people in the same social circle to interact with. Pretty much friends of friends, with idol culture and entertainers. So the 3 of them, Subini, Alex, and Eddie, they're all Korean American. And it's pretty much like that's their starting point when you're meeting anyone in entertainment. Like, oh, you're Korean American? Oh, me too. Where are you from? New York? Oh, that's sick. We should totally hang out. You're a dope person. Alex was even talking about it as if like, yeah, my manager's standing right there. I don't even care. And part of that I feel like has to do with kind of the different, like the cross cultural nature of being Korean American. Kind of like whatever, like I'm here, it's fine. But I don't imagine like a native Korean person to have this level of laissez-faire to to wanting to interact with the opposite sex. So
I mean, it's also like a lot easier to make friends in Korea when you're just like, oh yeah, I was born in '94. Oh my gosh, me too. Now we're friends. Like, why can't it be that easy?
I mean, well, also like they're around each other all the time, right? I mean, their schedules are so hectic. There's a lot of overlap, so it's just like you bump into someone, and you heard something from a friend of a friend, and it's like, oh, this person, I don't know, like you said, is '94 baby, so it's like, oh, like you're '94 baby, me too. What's up? I like your new song. Cool choreo. Can I learn it? And today, 2021, there's something called TikTok. I think you're familiar. Have you seen the TikTok collaborations of all these idols? I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that's my new favorite thing. I love this trend.
I'm pretty sure some of those have resulted in relationships. I have no evidence to confirm this, but let's be real. There are male and female idols in these videos, and you cannot tell me that they're not like friends afterwards.
I think there's a lot of secrets in these idol TikToks.
I think that's something to explore in your TikTok world. So one of the things that they also mentioned on the show was like the dating within the industry and kind of that awkwardness. I think you alluded to a little bit. What is your, I don't know, like what do you think if like two idols who are now exes ran into each other at Nikigayo, and how do you think that interaction would play out?
I mean, there's a bunch of like fan edits of stuff like that where people say like, oh, we know the situation. This is why this person was looking at them funny, when like really like nobody knows. But I imagine that's exactly what that is. Like, oh, it's you. I'll just turn my shoulder very slightly to make it look like I don't like you because I don't like you right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of intentional awkwardness. Not intentional that they chose to be awkward, but intentional. It's like, oh, I can only be awkward around this person because we dated.
Some aggressiveness, maybe?
Yeah, passive aggression. I mean, that is also a natural consequence of previously dating someone. Speaking from experience. So kind of the thing they wrapped up on the show was, would you rather date someone in or not in the industry? And there's three answers that hit the entire spectrum, right? So Alex said that he wants to date someone outside the industry because he wants to have a separation between his work life and then like come home to someone who can talk about like a different sphere of the world, right? Where it's like, oh, I need to decompress, I need to separate. I need a significant other to like to talk about something else at night, right? And then you have Eddie, who he wants to date someone within the industry because they understand each other and they can get each other through kind of the difficult times. And then Subini, she says she would like to date someone in the industry, but not necessarily an idol. Someone who kind of understands the pressures of being an idol, but isn't necessarily the idol themselves. I guess for you, like, how do you reconcile this for your own life? Like, how can you compartmentalize and say, like, I guess where would you fall under as far as if you were to date like an engineer or someone not an engineer, and how would you describe that for yourself?
This is definitely something I've talked about with my coworkers of like, oh, do you want to date someone in the industry because they like understand us? And I'm like, yeah, but not because they're in the industry, just because the people in our industry, the kind of people that it flocks are the kind of people I usually associate with. So I definitely think common interests are important, but I don't think they're necessary. Like, I've dated a mountain climber, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, up until, that's all he talked about. But it's always fun to learn about new interests and new things. at least for me. And, you might not find those new experiences within the social circle that you're always in.
Yeah, I think a lot of that just has to go with like elements of compatibility, right? Where it's like no one category like satisfies every single need. So like even if that person is in the same industry as you, will they understand you? Maybe they have a different take or like personality or way of resolving conflicts that's completely different than how you would resolve it. And again, like you said with the mountain climber, what if they just talk about themselves all the time
Yep.
and you can't get a word in? So then, where does your respite go for talking about your day? I don't know. Relationships are complicated. Let's move on now to a little bit of psychology corner here on Soju Sessions. So, as many of you know, I studied psychology in college, and it's just something that I keep around in my back pocket, in the back of my mind as I go through my life, think about things, think about the world, people, behavior, and approaching problems. So I do remember there is a term in psychology called transference. So it's described as when a person, an individual, redirects their emotions or feelings from one person to another. An example of this is non-familiar transference, where an individual can treat someone else in an idealized way and expect them to behave in a certain kind of way for the purposes of filling their internal need, right? So for us, an example will be idols and how idols are supposed to behave, how they're supposed to be, whether they're clean cut, they're wholesome, they're personable, they're always stage ready, ready to connect with you. Therese, do you feel like you've experienced this type of transference when you've created these expectations or this worldview in meeting new people, or perhaps looking to date someone and catching yourself with this transference of, oh, you're not an idol, you don't meet any of these expectations, I have to stop thinking like this?
Sorry. I don't think I've ever had something like that. I've definitely experienced that when I'm like trying to talk to friends and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell you this awful dad joke. And then I expect them to react, horribly, which for some reason gives me great delight. And then I tell that same joke to someone I don't really know and they respond like fake happy about it. And I get upset like, oh, you're not my friend, you're not reacting the way I expected you to. But I can't say that dating someone has ever given me any kind of like break in an illusion because I usually enter the dating field with no expectation, so I'm not disappointed.
And that's something I've kind of adopted over the past couple of years with regards to like dating, but also people in general, right? Where you still want to have a high standard for the quality of people that you're meeting, interacting with, people you're keeping in your life. But you do have to kind of temper your expectations with who they are as people. In a lot of ways, meeting them halfway, because not everyone is going to have the same level of interest or knowledge or bandwidth for whatever it is that fulfills you as a person. So, an example is K-pop. I have a lot of friends who understand and know what K-pop is. I have some friends and family who just understood K-pop this year because BTS is a thing. I cannot talk to them about BTS or K-pop or anything to the same degree that I can you or anyone on the server. So again, like high quality people, very understandable, very cordial, but I'm not going to expect them to know every single thing about Twice or Blackpink or Alexa or Tiffany. Now I'm just naming girl groups. So on that note, with regards to dating and interest and your level of expectation with people, how has that been? What are
Honestly,
what are your experiences with dating someone who has similar interests to you or perhaps completely different interests from you?
so also playing on expectations. I think it's especially relevant now when people are mostly online dating and then they're meeting up in real life. And it's really hard to set expectations when you're talking to someone online, especially if you've only been talking for like a few weeks or a month or so. I've been having trouble figuring out what to expect before I meet someone in person. So like I'll be talking with them, I'll think they're really cool, and then I'll develop that idealized, mindset, and then I'll have to bring myself down like, "Oh yeah, they're probably not like this. They probably most definitely do not look like Kim Tae-young. So I need to bring my expectations down." And as long as I can keep myself in check there, it's all right. But what was the second half of your question? Sorry.
What's it been like dating someone who has the same interests as you, or dating someone who has completely none of the same interests as you? So similar to the mountain climber guy.
Yes. So I did go on a date and talk online a bit with someone that was interested in K-pop as well. And we had really great conversations online. It was like flawless. I really liked him online. And then we met in person, and the physical attraction was just not there. There was nothing. And I felt bad because I felt like I was getting to know the real him when I was online. But there is still a chemical reaction that happens when you're developing a crush or, getting to know someone that you really like. And he just did not meet that chemical expectation. So it's like I've dated someone who had the similar interest in me that I thought I would really like. I've dated someone that didn't have similar interests in me that I thought I'd really like. Both times didn't end up that well. But, that's kind of the game of dating, is just figuring out, everyone's different. So there's no way to say, like, if this guy likes K-pop and he's hot, then I'm totally going to be in love with him. There's no way to say that. It's just like you got to let it develop on its own.
Yeah, that's part of living, right? The lived experience of successful and failed romantic endeavors. I've had very similar experiences where, I've dated someone who tried really hard to be interested in the same things as me. We met at, it wasn't a rave, it was a music show. Let's call it that. We were definitely inebriated. We had we had consumed things, and it was great. We connected, hit it off right away because, like you said, there is also a chemical, physical attraction that is a requirement for everyone. So it all worked out to start. Okay, so we go on a couple hikes, we talk. Okay, so she's not like super into being active. Okay, that's okay. But then I start talking about anime and comic books and Star Wars and comic conventions. And she's like trying really hard to nod and like, yeah, totally. Yeah, you're like, this is great. Like, I'm so happy for you for going to a comic convention instead of hanging out with me this weekend. And I was like, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Oh, this is great. I love this relationship. 4 months later, says not working. And I understood why.
I don't think it was that.
I didn't fight it, honestly. And no, it was that. It was absolutely just not being compatible with each other. I mean, we were very like cordial. We were very nice to each other. I was very much a gentleman. She was very much a lady, and she tried her best. But ultimately, it's one of those where it's like, if I'm gonna be, if it's summertime, and I'm going to a convention every 3 weeks, and she doesn't want to know anything about it, much less want to be there, I think that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Not to say that she needed to be there all the time, but if she just wasn't privy to that world, I don't think she was ever going to understand.
I do think it's imperative to show interest in other people's interests.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the compromise, right? Where it's like, so her interests were very much in like, this is probably also another issue with our relationship. A lot of holistic care. And
Huh, interesting.
yeah, so a lot of holistic improvement. I think that's what she eventually did as a profession. A couple of years down the line, she got her license in something. You know how I feel about certain things.
Holistic.
But again, I wasn't being an asshole about it. I was like being very inquisitive, and I wanted to learn more about why she thought that way. And I never like pushed back and like questioned her and just like, this is wrong, this is not science. I was just like, oh, just very curious. But at the same time, I couldn't fake it enough to the point where it's like she felt any kind of connection. So yeah, that is my dating story with regards to compatibility. All right, so let's move on to kind of the closing thoughts of our conversation today. Therese has asked the nation, what kind of dating advice do you or your friends need right now? So she asked that in question of the day. She got a lot of responses. Therese, do you have any memorable responses from anyone from the nation that you'd like to highlight this evening?
All right, well, most of the responses were basically like, I don't have a crush and I'm not dating anyone, which in itself is kind of the advice that you need. How do you meet someone? How do you develop a crush? Like, how do you keep yourself open to such things? I don't know. I think it's kind of a question answers a question sort of thing where it's like, well, do you think that you deserve to love anyone right now? Because that's kind of a big thing. If you don't love yourself, if you don't feel like anyone would love you, then you're less open to love innately. So I think it's very important that everyone just take a good look in the mirror, just stare yourself down, and instead of finding the flaws, find all the things that you love about yourself. Lizzo that shit and get into your head and say, man, my nose is looking super small today. Or I don't know, I feel like 2 pounds lighter. Anything. And it doesn't have to be physical. It could be like, wow, I know a lot about K-pop. I am so knowledgeable about a subculture that is just now starting to become popular and mainstream. I'm pretty cool, you know? Anything.
Did you just low key find a way to slip BTS into this conversation?
When did I say BTS?
Love
Love
yourself.
yourself?
But
What can I say? They're in my blood.
it always somehow comes back to BTS. That being
Because
said, oh, go ahead.
Army knows.
Yes, yes. But that being said, I think it is an important message for everyone to hear. Yes, it is very difficult to put yourself out there, to find someone. How do you meet someone? How do you even get to the point of making those mistakes, failing, picking yourself up, back up to learn from those mistakes? How do you even get there? I think the pandemic has made that very difficult for everyone at any stage in your life. But guess what? The world's opening up again. People have adopted different ways of communication, different ways to meet new people. And I think
Hope.
in the hope, yeah. And I think there are skills that people have picked up over the past 18 months that I think are transferable to real life and meeting real people. So I guess my advice for that question would be all the things that you're doing on the internet, try to do that in front of real people, because you'll probably find yourself having to regulate and manage your own behavior a little bit better than you would on the internet, because now you're in front of another person. And guess what? The better version of you will probably express than you think is how I like to put it. Not to say that anyone on the internet is being a poor human being. I'm just saying sometimes we forget that there's people on the other side of the text that we send. So I think once you're face to face with another person, I think there's a natural self-correction with the way that we interact with people. I don't know. What else you got? What was some other highlights from our question of the day?
There was a lot of banter about exes. How, like, should you talk to an ex after you break up? Which, I mean, sure, doesn't hurt, right? But I think the most important thing to think about before you text back your ex is, do you think this will make you a better person? Do you think this will help you in the future? And if that answer is yes, because you still love them and you want to know more about them and you think that there's more to going on, or maybe you're just interested in their lives, then sure, I bet that's fine. But if you remember what they were like and you remember, oh, they were really toxic, I don't think that this will end greatly, then maybe just put it on the back burner and think about it some other time. But honestly, I'm not sure. I'm still questioning this myself. Like, do you talk to an ex after you break up? For me, it's been literal years since I broke up with someone that I was really close to, and we were best friends. And I am interested in their lives, but I also don't want that stigma of being someone that talks to their ex. You know what I mean? And it was not an insignificant relationship. Like, we dated for a long time. So it's hard to justify answering back and getting back in touch in a more regular way. What do you think?
I think it definitely has to do with where you are in your life, right? Where are you capable of talking to an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend without the expectation or hope that that will lead back into a relationship? Because if that person meant a lot to you in life, if you learned a lot from that person, if both of you are in loving relationships apart from each other, I think only good can come from meeting that person, seeing where they are in life, and perhaps gaining some kind of insight to how they got there. Because ultimately, it's about mutually parting, and it's about closing that page in each other's lives. And it's not to say that you don't have any value to each other outside of dating. It's just to say you need to be at the place where you can make that distinction. Because if both of you or one of you is coming at it from a different angle, it's gonna get messy. Emotions are already hard. But again, that comes with time and experience and maturity, and not everyone's gonna get there. Sometimes you never get there with the person you never date, and that sometimes you never get there with a person you have dated in the past. But I think it's a case by case, and I do think there is value in talking to an ex. Now, that being said, I have only talked to one ex in my 90 years of existence, so take that for a grain of salt.
I only talked to one ex after high school, and he is happily living with his boyfriend of like 6 years, so I think it's fine now. Other than that, I didn't consider, if I don't have any expectations to get back together, why would I hesitate to contact them? Maybe if you just put it out in the open, like, hey, I'm really happy, let's just hang out, I'm not interested in you anymore. I guess it sounds bad when I put it like that. But if you just like air it out, then with setting that expectation, it makes things a little more normal, I guess. And you don't have to refer to them as your ex anymore. They could just be your friend.
Yeah, a friend that you had previously dated, I think, is a nicer way to frame that in a lot of cases.
Not even like relevant.
Yeah.
Like, gosh, we went on a date like 10 years ago and it didn't last. We were in high school, whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's all about growth, right? I think it's just about getting to that point in your life where you can accept all the people that have been in your life for whatever reason. Yeah, and I think it's just time, and I think it's just allowing yourself to get there. Therese, this was an excellent conversation. I will let you have the closing thoughts. Do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to leave everyone with this week?
I'm really thinking. Just make your decisions based on you and not on anyone else.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you, Therese, for joining me this week to talk dating in K-pop and relationship stories. Subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or your preferred podcast platform, and continue the conversation on the Soju Talk K-pop podcast Discord. For Therese, I'm Crispy, and this has been the Soju Sessions.